Ladies and gentlemen, our referee has called a stop to this contest, declaring the winner by knockout and new MMA show! Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting round of and new MMA show. I'm your host, Michael Hansen, and I do all kinds of astonishing things with microphones because I am a ring announcer and cage announcer, and I am joined this week, as I always am, by my two buddies who bring MMA punditry to new heights, dare I say. Introducing first, from New York,
Mark Priaulx.
Do you like that? A little Yankees flavor on it?
Yankees intro, I will take it.
Number two.
They're winning right now, last I checked, and they had a lovely comeback yesterday. Yeah, how we doing? I don't think I have anything much to report. Didn't plan anything to say here, so yeah, that's what I've come with tonight.
Boom.
Got a fun one.
Killing it today, baby.
Bringing the energy. All right, let's just keep this thing rolling. Introducing now from Florida, the Sunshine State. He is the Nicaraguan Nightmare, Omar Artola. What's up, buddy?
What's going on? I am petting my cat. Let's hope that doesn't bite me in the ass 30 minutes into this event. Yeah, dude, I started taking these intermediate classes, man, and it's very different. It's a different step above the classes that I've been taking. There's like no pads. We're sort of like getting used to the feel of being in front of somebody and taking punches and being in the fire.
That's cool, man.
It's different. It's very, very different, and I see why they need to make sure that you're prepared before you even start getting into those classes, because we're going light, but I still definitely got my ass beat for like an hour. So it's a wild thing that's going on right now. And Tampa Muay Thai, shout out to my gym, Tampa Muay Thai. We went 3-0 this last weekend. Head kick KO. The man fucking, another dude walked down this kid for 3 rounds and just beat the shit out of him. I don't even know how that kid's survived. That kid's got a chin that's crazy. And then one of the coaches there, one of my coaches that I work with, he got a knee KO as well with a guy that was playing some stupid ass games inside of the cage. A lot of like he was like doing like, I don't know if you've ever seen that breakdancing, the kid that started breakdancing in the middle of the cage and then he got head kicked into oblivion.
I know exactly.
It was very similar to that. And when he started doing that in the ring, I was like, Joey better not lose to this motherfucker, because he is doing some real chooch ass shit right now. And Joey was on point and kneed him to hell and liver shot, and he was down. He couldn't get back up. It was great.
That's cool, man. That's cool. And if anybody has been wondering the past few episodes of why we seem to have a later and later start time, and why we mention from time to time during the show that it's getting later and later, and sometimes we are painfully crawling to the finish line of our show because it's like 1 a.m. It's because Omar has been advancing in his Muay Thai journey, and he's like, I'm still in class, guys. I'm checking 2,000 kicks tonight until my leg starts to bleed.
Yeah.
And then I get to go home.
Yeah, there's some bag work involved and some cardio involved and conditioning involved, and yeah, there's a lot involved. I'm trying to catch up to a lot of these motherfuckers that are there, and they're really, really cool, good. Man. And it's a lot of work.
I love it, dude.
It's the best.
Awesome.
It is. What's new with me? Not much. Before we started, I actually had to ask for a little bit of a later start time because my 1-month-old is being a chooch, to coin a phrase. just doing baby things and just screaming uncontrollably. So, but we're here. We made it.
That's what my almost few weeks away from being 3-year-old was doing tonight. So just buckle up, because nothing's going to change for quite some time.
I know, man. I know.
That's true. You have an older one already,
Yeah.
Is that your second one? Your second one's almost 3 already?
Yeah. My older.
That is nuts.
Turned 6 a couple months ago, and the younger one's about to be 3.
Wow.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
Veteran of this dad game.
Yeah,
honestly.
my
I'm tired.
my 2-year-old is fully in the phase where you just never know what he's going to lose his shit over.
Yeah,
You just don't know.
sounds about right.
All right, let's get on with the show here, folks. Enough about our kids and their tantrums. We have quite a bit to talk about tonight, some fun stuff. We're going to recap the fights from this past weekend's UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill. We're going to throw a bunch of these fights into our lightning round. We're going to find out who rose and fell in Mark's rankings system that we affectionately call the Priaulx Rankings. We're going to go inside the MMA sphere to find out what's going on in the world of MMA outside of the cages with Omar. And because we have no MMA to really look forward to this coming weekend, we decided to use the back half of this week's show to do our top 10 lists of the all-time greatest flyweights. So myself, Mark, and Omar will each be turning in our top 10 list, along with perhaps some honorable mentions. All right, boys, before we get into any fight talk, let us quickly thank our audience. If you guys are watching this right now on YouTube, thank you so much. If you like the videos and clips that you've been watching and you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to our channel, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell icon so that you get notified when we drop a new clip or video. If you want audio only, we got you there. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and of course find us on social media. You can find us at all the places at @andnew_MMA show. Okay, let's hop on this ride. This week, the name on the marquee has got to be Mackenzie Dern, who this past weekend at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the main event of this UFC Fight Night, defeated Angela Overkill Hill by unanimous decision. In 5 rounds, the scorecards read 49-43, 49-44, and 49-44. Mark, let me send it over to you first. Get us started here. Give us your reaction of Mackenzie Dern looking as aggressive as she ever has, looking as good as she ever has.
Yeah, I will follow on both of those things. She looked awesome, and as far as the aggression, I know I predicted last week that we were going to see an aggressive Mackenzie Dern, but holy hell, even I didn't think it would be quite like that. I mean, she came out swinging from jump. She had cracked Hill within like a minute and a half. Before 2 minutes was up, she'd knocked her down. I mean, it was a whole different Mackenzie Dern. And we have seen her comfort in her hands growing fight by fight. We've seen these signs of the striking becoming a weapon at times for her. And this is the one where it kind of all came together, where we got to kind of see the fruits of the labor and the signs that we've been seeing peeking out. It came together in this one. And maybe the biggest takeaway for me personally is that if you remember after the last fight to Xiaonan, which was a close fight where she had some rounds and maybe let certain positions slip away, I had said that I thought a huge wrinkle in Mackenzie's game that she could add that would change things for her would be to add some heavy ground and pound. Her ground and pound has always kind of been a little bit like faint. I don't know how to describe it. It hasn't had the impact you would think she could generate, especially because she always kind of throws fairly hard on the feet, even though her striking was not so refined. And that is what we saw now in this fight. I mean, of course, she was still sub-hunting, and she was phenomenal in the transitions and the control and everything you expect from her. But there was heavy ground and pound now. There was big elbows coming down, thudding damage accumulating on Angela Hill's face. And that was a new wrinkle for Mackenzie, and it's something that I'm sure will open up submissions for her more going forward. She couldn't find one here. I mean, props to Angie. She did scrap the whole way. She was in some miserable positions at times where she absolutely could have chosen to quit if she was a lesser woman than she is, but she never did. She defended really well all fight, which also shows you the improvements in her game as her career has gone on, because she was not that level of grappler initially. But this night was all Mackenzie Dern. The scorecards told the story. It was completely dominant. And even though she didn't find the finish, she still walks away with what I would say was a pretty big statement.
Omar, bringing you in here, what would you say was the story of the fight, of this clash of styles between primarily Muay Thai attack of Angela Hill versus the jiu-jitsu prowess of Mackenzie Dern? I
think the biggest takeaway for me was the hands. I mean, when we talked about this fight, I don't know anybody who was talking about Mackenzie Dern potentially outstriking Angela Hill. And a lot of that was going on the feet, especially earlier on in that fight. I mean, her hands were straight, they were precise. And the thing that I love about that you can see that's super visible in Mackenzie Dern now as opposed to in her previous fights when she wasn't comfortable is her eyes. And she doesn't look away when she strikes, right? She doesn't close her eyes anymore. She doesn't look away. She's not fucking throwing with reckless abandon, hoping that she hits something with her hands. She's very purposeful with her strikes now. And she's still got a little work to do. She's not 100% crisp, but the improvements I think are exceptionally vast, and they're effective, which I think is the most important part. You do got to give props to Angela Hill, though, man, because she survived a lot of really disgusting submission attempts, especially once Mackenzie Dern was on top. She had a couple arm bars that were one tweak away from getting pulled all the way to extension. And Mackenzie and Hill was just holding on for dear life, and I think that was a lot of the story in certain parts of that fight. I think I gave Mackenzie Dern at least 2 10-8 rounds in that fight. It showed the resiliency of Angela Hill, but it showed the dominance at the same time of Mackenzie Dern. And as much as they're both dogs, man, Mackenzie Dern is just on a different level, and I think that was kind of what we talked about last week.
Yeah, man. There were some moments of that fight. I think early in the 3rd or 4th round, Mackenzie Dern just came out like a bat out of hell, got a takedown, and did some kind of magic with Angela Hill's arms, and like wound up hunting for a triangle before you even blinked. And it was like, oh, damn, that's what she can do. That's how good she is. And the better she gets at striking, the more and more she's going to be such a problem. Because, like, are we going to take her down? Was Angela Hill going to, like, change it up and change the levels and, like, try to? No.
I mean, she kind of did. She kind of had to. She didn't really have an answer on the feet. And even then, she got chewed up on the ground, but she did turn into a bit of a wrestler in that fight.
She turned into a clincher, I feel. It was like the only spot where she was sort of safe. She was just trying to be clinchy, but then that let Dern kind of work trips and little off-balance spots and things like that.
Yeah.
But, hey, it was definitely a testament to Angela Hill's will in this fight as well. She toughed it out. She took quite a bit of damage in this fight. Tough as nails, she showed. Absolutely. But it was just this was a showcase for Mackenzie Dern. She came out. I believed her in the lead up to this fight for the media from this past week of saying that she's been going through quite a bit personally, going through a divorce that apparently hasn't been fun, and she's mentioned something. I saw her on El Helwani talking about the courts or defending herself in the legal system. Something about probably going through some legal stuff, maybe with the kid or maybe with money or something like that, or with an estate.
Well, we were going to touch on it in the Sphere, but just to give you a little preview, it has to do with a little bit with money. She said it got really dirty once the money got involved, and there have been restraining orders involved in their relationship. There was apparently some domestic violence disputes and things like that. So there's apparently a history as to why that divorce happened in the first place, and then things have still been pretty confrontational afterwards too.
They both seem so happy and like smiley.
Yeah, he was always like there supporting her. It was I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. Well said.
Unfortunately, a lot of those
you never know, man.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that tend to smile too much in public tend to be the ones that you got to worry about, I feel like.
But he's not a fighter. He was like a surfer.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
What if he was like, yo, she beat the shit out of me every night. Like,
I think he actually did say something about how he used to get that he's been abused by her too, or something like that, and she was like, I defended myself.
That's ugly. That's ugly, man. That sucks. It does suck. But anyway, bringing it back to the fight, I bought into that narrative that she was putting out there. I was like, I think she's going to bring in a chip on her shoulder for this fight. She's going to take out that aggression in the cage, and that's exactly what she did, guys. So that being said,
her moniker has been for this fight. Her moniker was Divorce Dern.
Divorce Dern. Oh my God. We've had Dad Cerrone. Now we have Divorce Dern.
Sea-level Kane.
Sea-level Kane. She's the new legend. She's the new legend. Yeah.
The mythical
The new
creature
mythical
unlocked.
fighter. Well, let's talk about where Divorce Dern goes next in her professional fighting career, because this was a big win, a big statement win, I should say, by Mackenzie Dern. Mark, if you were the matchmaker of the UFC, what would you do with Mackenzie Dern next? Who would you match her up with next?
I actually am with her call out of Rose Namajunas. It feels like it is maybe a bit much, but to me, this division is just so tough to book because all these top girls have mostly fought each other. Every one has a win over one and a loss to the other, and it's like all interchangeable for the most part. So as much as it's a jump for Mackenzie to fight Rose, Mackenzie is a star. She did look fantastic coming off that performance, and Rose hasn't fought in a minute. She needs to come back against someone, so I say why not? Let's do that fight.
I love that, man, because to your point, she is a star. Mackenzie Dern is one of the brightest stars in the sport, and especially on the women's side. And this is a big enough win over an established veteran in Angela Hill, and enough of a statement performance to be like, okay, let's do this. Let's match her up with a true marquee name in this division to get her into that upper echelon so that we can really start selling her more. Omar, what do you think?
So I'm gonna I'll be a little bullish on this. Carla Esparza is gonna be out for a minute, right? She's pregnant. She's kind of done, at least for the time being. Rose Namajunas hasn't fought. I don't really know what her deal is as to why she hasn't fought. I know she's been kind of doing there was a movie at some point, and she's been doing some other ventures and things like that. So I don't really know where she stands. So Mark picked her. I know Mackenzie Dern picked her. I'll exclude her from my process just because we've already had a pick for her. I think that Wei Li and Lemos is going to be an interesting fight, but I kind of want Mackenzie Dern at this point to fight the loser of Wei Li Lemos. I think that would be an interesting test to see where Mackenzie Dern is. I think Yan Xiaonan at this point has probably earned herself a title shot, so I still want to see Wei Li and Yan Xiaonan. I hope that that's the fight that ends up happening, and I hope that Mackenzie Dern ends up fighting Lemos.
Okay. Any names you guys have for...
Way though, that puts Mackenzie out for a bit.
I mean, she sounds like she's got some shit to deal with as it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair.
What about Angela Hill? What do you guys think about what's next for Angie Overkill Hill?
I'll say Marina Rodriguez for Angela Hill.
That's a great fight.
It's again, it feels like it's like almost a little bit of a reward. I think Marina and Mackenzie are ranked like right next to each
agree.
other. But again, Angela Hill has fought like everyone, and that's someone she hasn't fought. Marina has lost 2 in a row herself, so it's not like she's on the way up or anything. So I actually think that's a fun matchup that makes sense.
Great matchup. Both are going to stand up and strike. Omar, what do you think?
Who's this girl fighting? Man. I feel like I kind of want to see Angela Hill versus Tatiana Suarez, right? But Tatiana is already booked up against Virna.
John Janova.
Suarez,
Yeah.
I think, really.
So I think it might be interesting to see her fight potentially the loser of that fight. And yeah, because Mark makes a good point. It's like Angela Hill still still in the top 15, has fought a lot of these girls, and a lot of these girls she's fought relatively recently.
Yeah, she
and
just
like, I
lost
don't
to
really
Virna 1 fight ago.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily care to see her against Michelle Waterson again. I think Tisha's going to be out obviously for a minute. She's also pregnant. Mm-hmm. They fought before as well, which I think was a close one at that. So
1 fight.
yeah, it's a weird spot for Angela, but I know Angela will probably take a fight. She's kind of like the Neil Magny of that division.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, let's move right along down this UFC Fight Night card. Congrats to Mackenzie Dern for the probably biggest statement win of her career over the very tough veteran in Angela Hill.
Facts.
Okay, moving on. to the co-main event of this UFC Fight Night at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. In the middleweight division, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez takes out Edmen Shahbazyan by TKO via elbows and punches. The official time, 1 minute and 1 second of round number 3. Omar, start us off this time. What did you think about this performance from Fluffy Anthony Hernandez?
Yeah, man, this was interesting. I think a lot of what we talked about last week kind of came to fruition. I think that Edmen Shahbazyan looked good early. He was very crisp, very on point in round 1. Was able to do a lot of nice things in round 1, a lot of good strikes, a lot of good movement. But Hernandez is a fucking dog, and that was what we talked about last week. And he's a very unorthodox fighter, especially when it comes to the hands. Especially, he's trying to take you down. He's trying to work on his ground game, make sure that that's the focal point of his approach to the fight. But he can crack. And once he got past round 1, Shahbazyan started to slow down, and Hernandez doesn't. And that's where we really start to see the momentum shift. And he just ate Shahbazyan towards the end by the end of that fight. I mean, it just got progressively worse. And I think we had talked about, I don't know if I was the only one. I feel like I picked a submission. I feel like we all, or at least me and Mark, might have picked a submission.
Yeah, I said round 3 sub. I thought I was going to get it too, but
same. But he didn't even really want to risk it. I mean, he was battering Shahbazyan. Shahbazyan didn't really have an answer for it, so there was no need to try to sink in a choke. He could just
threw the arm under the neck a couple times, but as soon as it wasn't there right away, he just went back to punching.
And again, I don't think he needed to, right? It's like I feel like he probably would have went for it more if he wasn't doing work in the ground and pound as well, because Shahbazyan was spent by that third round. Yeah. But I felt like Hernandez just needed to keep working like he did, and he got the finish exactly the way he needed it to happen. I thought it was a great performance for Hernandez, and I'm telling you, man, that kid continues to put on these performances that just force people to take him seriously.
Yeah, man. Mark, are you taking Anthony Hernandez seriously yet? And what were your key takeaways from this fantastic performance from him?
Oh, I've been taking Anthony Hernandez seriously for a minute. I'm actually looking back right now because I'm trying to remember which fight it was. So
it was right after he subbed that
the Vieira fight. Yeah, it was Vieira.
Yeah.
From that fight, I was like, this dude's pace is fucking stupid. And then when he did it again to Josh Fremd, I was like, okay, we're all the way on board. But add another tired victim to the list. Like Omar said, first couple minutes of the fight, Shahbazyan was actually looking sharp as hell, to his credit. But once Hernandez was able to get a sense of the range and then close it, the fight changed and never changed back. It just became a grueling, nonstop, high-paced fight, also known as every Anthony Hernandez fight. And Edmen was trying to battle, to his credit. He had a couple moments in there. He got out of a bunch of tough spots, especially that guillotine in round 2 that looked tight. But the pace is just unbelievable. Like, there's literally not a second to breathe when Anthony Hernandez has a hold of you. And he does it again. He wins a fight via attrition, just via making your body not have anything left to give. And that's really what it always is for him. He just breaks guys, and he broke another guy. So there's probably going to be a certain level of fighter that can withstand that pace and maybe make Anthony Hernandez look bad when that pace is not a weapon he can lean on. But at this point, I am becoming very interested to see who that man might be, because this is a hell of an impressive run, and I'm loving it.
Hell yeah, man. Dude, I'm going to say this. Anthony Hernandez is quickly now becoming one of my favorite guys to watch. Like, he's on a card, I'm like, ooh, we have some Fluffy Hernandez violence coming our way. I will say this, too. A lot has been said about his pace and his motor and his cardio, but my man has great technique. He's not just he doesn't just swarm his opponent and makes it a barn burner. It's that he overwhelms you with crowding you and constantly throwing techniques at you. He has disgusting elbows. He has so many tools, and he's good everywhere. He's just good everywhere. I thought Shahbazyan came out with really good aggression in round 1. I think he tried to sort of catch Hernandez early, kind of catch him asleep, so to speak.
Yep.
But Hernandez weathered that storm, and like you guys both already said, he just overwhelmed Shahbazyan with his pace. And great win, man. Let's keep going with this guy and see how far he can go. That being said, Omar, segues are fun. How far is he going to go with this next fight? If you were the matchmaker, who would you match him up with at middleweight next?
It's a real goddamn problem because I kind of want to move him up pretty significantly, but everybody is pretty booked up, which is really unfortunate. And with the momentum that this kid has, I really hate the idea that he has to sit out for a little bit and just kind of let things play out, right? Just to kind of throw a couple names out there, I guess. And it seems like, Mark, you probably have the same issue I do trying to figure out where the hell he goes. But I do want to see him against guys like Chris Curtis at this point, right? The Chris Curtises, the Gaslams, the Brendan Allens. I think a fight with Joe Pyfer at this point would even be pretty fun. I think he deserves a little bit more than Joe Pyfer, but I think Joe Pyfer is a little bit overrated right now. I think his ranking is based not just on his performances, but also the hype that he's been getting as well. I don't know if he's earned the spot where he's at potentially. And I just think it would be a good fight. So I'm not really sure where you go with him, but those are a few of the names that I would like to see. So if he does have to sit out and wait till some of those fights, finish and progress and manifest, then that's what needs to happen. But any of those fights I think would be fun and a great matchup for him.
Mark, what do you think?
I'm pulling the trigger on moving him up the line. Omar mentioned a lot of these guys are booked, so it makes it a little tricky on what to do with him. I'm going up to Jack Hermanson. I don't want him to fight another non-ranked fighter at this point. I feel like he's earned it. I feel like him and Jack Hermanson is an interesting fight. Jack was supposed to fight back in April against Brendan Allen. He had to pull out because he got some type of injury, but apparently it's nothing that's a huge deal. So I'm imagining at some point in the near future he's going to be ready to sign on for a new fight here. That's where I'm going.
Okay. Love it.
I like it.
Okay, let's move on.
Well, can I just say real quick?
Oh, yeah, please.
Shahbazyan,
So sorry. Sorry.
Just because Omar mentioned it, my Shahbazyan matchup was actually going to be Joe Pyfer. I feel like they're almost similar guys in that they have looked really good at times, but Shahbazyan kind of keeps faltering. Pyfer, it's only been a couple fights. You're like, does he deserve this hype? I say put them both in there, see if one can knock the other out and get it going for himself.
At this point, Joe Pyfer is like, you roll the dice. He might get a knockout. He might not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder, does anybody know what
Great point.
oh God, what they got RoboCop fighting Dennis Tululian.
Say it right.
Yeah.
Is that not how I say it?
Hobocop.
I thought you were saying Tululian.
Remember, Hobocop got KO'd in his last fight by a debutante, so...
Yeah, so now he's back to just RoboCop.
Yeah.
He's got to earn the hobo.
He got knocked down the line.
He got knocked out by somebody that doesn't have a wiki page. That's no good. It's no good. You know? All right.
Shall we move on?
Let's.
Okay. Let's see. At a catch weight of 120 pounds, Lupita Godinez secured the unanimous decision victory over Emily Ducote. On the broadcast, did they say Ducote?
Ducote.
Ducote. The official scores read 30-27, 29-28, and 29-28, all for Godinez. Mark, start us off. Give us your take on Godinez rolling and looking pretty good.
Yeah, so I went with Godinez because I thought the pressure and the pace were going to be the difference, but I envisioned it being more wrestling-based, and she was really pretty comfortable with the hands, which I didn't quite see coming. I mean, she came out of the gate looking sharp as hell. She was winning the striking from jump, crisp jabs. The 1-2 was landing over and over again. And it kind of became evident pretty quick that if Ducote was going to lose the striking, there wasn't a ton of other avenues for her in this fight because she wasn't going to out-wrestle Lupi. So Lupi kind of ended up, rather than using her wrestling offensively, she just used it defensively because Ducote did try because she had to change it up, but she couldn't do anything. So Lupi was just shucking her off, making her keep striking with her. And there was a point in the fight where Ducote did kind of start figuring it out a bit. She got Lupi's timing down a little bit. She had some strong moments, but overall, Lupi's hands were looking crispy. The pressure guided her. And I thought we saw some nice strides for her in that part of her game, and she certainly earned the win on the cards.
Omar?
I'm curious, Mark. How did you have that fight? Did you give?
I gave Ducote round 3.
You did give Ducote round 3. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had.
Well, I mean, I gave it. I watched it one time, and it ended, and I was like, I think she won that round. It's not like I rewatched it.
I never at any point felt that Ducote won any round, and I was just curious because I've seen a few people score at 30-27. Obviously, one of the judges did as well, and I've seen a lot of people score at 29-28. I'm not gonna die on the hill for the third round, but at the same time, I just feel like I never saw that momentum, that real shift for Ducote, which surprised me. I had Ducote winning that fight in my head last week, but that didn't go. I mean, that's not the Lupi that I had her going up against. And like Mark said, I think there was some real improvements there and some real comfort in her hands that I don't think we've seen before. So it's an interesting development, and it was really fun to see that side of Lupi.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I love it when I look good making my picks 5-0, baby. Let's talk real quick. Moving along a little faster now. What do you guys see? What's next for Lupi Godinez? Mark?
I will say take one of either Luana Pinheiro or Michelle Waterson. I know they just fought each other, and Pinheiro won and Waterson lost, but I actually think still either one of them works as a proper next step for Lupi Godinez, so whoever will take it, I think it works.
Omar, do you have any other bright ideas?
I think you give her Angela Hill.
Okay.
You can go in that direction.
I like it.
Wait,
you guys
didn't
want
she
to say
just fight Angela Hill?
Lupi?
Literally. Yeah, 2 fights ago. Angela Hill
For
beat her.
fuck's sake.
I had to think about it for a second.
I can't with this division. You know what actually would be a fun fight? Well, let me check first at this point because you never know. Carolina looked good. Kolkiewicz.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You guys have anything to say about Ducote?
I'm going to move her down. She's lost a couple in a row. I'm going to give her Sam Hughes.
Okay.
I'm also going to move her down, and I'm going to feed her to Yasmin Haragui.
Haragui. Okay.
Like it. That's a good one.
Okay.
I prefer that one.
Okay, moving right along. A fun one. Joaquin Buckley gets another phenomenal knockout, knocking out Andre Fialho, his welterweight debut of the UFC Fight Night. Omar, start us off. Give us your take on that tremendous technique that he threw, that head kick, and finish him off with strikes on the ground. Really, one strike. The ref stepped in. What's your take?
I thought Buckley looked great, man. I think you could see that he's a lot more mobile without all that additional muscle on his body. You can see he's a little bit smaller than what he was before, which is saying something because the man is still goddamn gigantic. But he looked good, man. I mean, he was very bouncy, very mobile. I loved the use of movement that he had in that fight. It was a weird approach from Fialho. Apparently, he was talking about how he wanted to be more patient and kind of read things and things like. But it was too much. There was too much of allowing Buckley to kind of basically do whatever he wanted, and Fialho not really moving forward and kind of keeping his base. Right, he was backing up too much. And if there's one thing I've learned recently is that backing up is one of the worst things that you can do in a fight, especially consistently. So it was a weird performance from Fialho because I think he's better than what he showed in that fight. I think Buckley is a motherfucker, but I don't think that was a performance that I expected from Fialho. With that being said, Buckley's strength and his kicks are something that you need to watch out for. And that kick to the head was as bad as it gets, man. I mean, maybe an angle off, maybe a little bit tighter, and Fialho would have went completely out. But dude, you're nitpicking at that point. That kick was beautiful, and that was all she wrote.
Mark, what was your take on welterweight Buckley?
I had a very similar take, actually. I thought Fialho really let Buckley lead the dance right out of the gate in round one. Like, Buckley wasn't landing a ton, but he was at least throwing and giving Fialho things to think about, whereas Fialho was kind of just doing a lot of standing and watching. So I can't say I was expecting that. But Buckley looked good. He mixed in some takedowns. He couldn't hold Fialho down, but even so, it was still nice to see the strength and the physicality in the wrestling that Buckley gets to show off a little bit more now at 170 that he couldn't as much at 185. And then round two, they did start trading more. Fialho was opening up a bit. The right straight was actually landing, but Buckley adjusted, set up a picture-perfect head kick, and that was all she wrote. But I will say, you guys tell me what you think. I feel like I'm the only person in the world who was bothered by this. I didn't see shit about it on Twitter. I was not a fan of that shit at the finish from Joaquin Buckley. I mean,
yeah.
The announcers were saying, "Oh, Kerry Hatley was late getting in there." He was not.
He was
fucking
not.
late. He
was not
stepped
late.
in. He put his hands on Buckley,
Yeah.
and it was on Buckley's right side. And Buckley pushes off, raises the arm that Hatley's hands were on, and throws a hammer fist at Fialho. Like, what the fuck is that? And why is no one talking about it? We do not need that bullshit. And I felt like it actually put a stain on Buckley's win for me because it's the only thing I could focus on.
Interesting. I honestly did not think about that at all. I just thought that was sort of in the motion. I also thought that from one replay, it looked like the hammer fist didn't connect.
I couldn't tell if it connected or not. I actually kept trying to figure that out.
Because it looked like Fialho's head was kind of falling back as he was throwing it. I thought it kind of whiffed.
Well, I can tell you this, for all of the talk of intentional versus not intentional, regardless of whether he fucking hit him or not, the intention was to hit him while he was already knocked out. And I didn't care for it either, to be honest. I did notice it. And I don't think there was anything, it was definitely not a kind of like an in the moment kind of thing as far as already being in motion. Buckley kicked him, walked over to him like a serial killer, stepped over this motherfucker, and, almost jeered at him as he stepped over him, and then just calmly went and tried to hammer fist him. Like he that was pure ridiculousness as far as I'm concerned. And I do kind of agree. I'm surprised no one's talking about it. And I remember hearing the broadcast, and Bisping was on this broadcast, right?
Yeah, he might have been the one that was like, "Oh, the ref got there late," and I was like, "No, he didn't."
Well, Bisping was also like, another one for good measure. Like, I was like, what measure?
Yeah, you're right.
We were good.
They were. You're right. And that's why I'm pointing out what arm it was, because it's not like it was the left, and like he had already lifted, and they got grabbed on the right side, and the left is just in motion already. Yeah. It wasn't. He got grabbed when his right arm was still down, and he shucked it off, raised his right arm, and threw the hammer fist.
Yeah, the referee was literally putting pressure on Buckley. There was a pushing motion involved to keep Buckley back that was then removed by Buckley, then preceded by a fucking hammer fist. Like, the referee had to then push him harder to move him out of the way completely.
And you could tell he was pissed, the ref. Like, he was like, what the fuck
100%.
are you doing?
And to be honest,
I don't know
he
why
had
no one's talking about it.
He had every right to make us think about it too. Like, I don't think they wanted to get into the disqualify this, disqualify that, especially if it didn't actually hit him. You know what I mean? Yeah. But let's be real. Like, Mike, in that situation, if the referee has his hands on him, right? And let's say Buckley does hit him, and now Fialho is fucking out cold when he wasn't after that head kick. Is like that might change things. You know what I mean? Maybe he gets away with it because he didn't land clean. But if he made the situation worse with a strike that is technically illegal at that point,
right?
I think it's
the
a bad look, man.
It should be over.
Yeah, was over. Too, the referee was there.
I guess because it, like at first I was like, oh damn, but then when they flipped to a different angle replay, I was like, wait, I don't even think it landed. because I think Fialho's head was kind of falling back and it missed.
I couldn't tell.
Luck.
But
Maybe that just made it kind of go away for me, because I feel like I'm usually the guy who utterly hates when guys follow a guy to the ground that's already stiff and like lands like one or two more hard shots to like a stiff fighter. I hate that. I think that's bad.
Dude could be fucking awake. If the referee tells you to stop, you stop.
Same.
That's where I'm at with
the referee
it.
for me. Like I get it more.
Wow, that's so interesting.
When you follow a knocked out dude to the ground, if the ref doesn't stop you, because you're like, I can't risk that he pops his fucking head up right now. If the
But
ref
this is
stops
why
you
you need-
and you shuck the ref off, I literally went from being like, yes, Joaquin Buckley, to be like, oh, fuck this guy. Like in one
wow.
second. Like, yeah,
That's
I don't know.
funny.
I really.
It's not
So
good,
do you
dude. I mean,
guys-
the referee's in there to literally be the guy to make sure that nothing crazy happens. There's a trust. There's like a one of those social contracts, like they say in John Wick, right? Like there's a trust and understanding in what the referee does, a respect in his decision making and things like that. And that's, to me, that's the reason why I think a lot of these referees need to be held to a higher standard. There's a lot of things that are on the line that these random ass men from random ass places are making for a lot of these competitors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And situations like this, I think they need to have a little bit more control. I don't doubt for a second that Herb Dean would have had shucked Buckley away a lot harder than that from jump, or even Jason Herzog.
Not Herb Dean.
You know what I mean?
Not no.
I think
Neither of those
you
guys.
push him
Mark
off
Goddard.
hard, like you typically see, because Buckley had stood still for so long. So I think in Kerry Hatley's head, he was like, all right, he's not going to hit him. I just need to like put my hand on him so he knows the fight's over.
Yeah.
And then next thing he knows, he's hitting him again. And he's like, wait, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
I also do want to point out, I also didn't really like how that sequence ended up getting to where it was, right? The head kick was beautiful and all that stuff, but it was directly after a headbutt. And Buckley basically went like full Bobby Green and just smashed his head into Fialho's face. And Fialho was like, oh, kind of took a second there or whatever, and then they kind of went back into it. And literally almost as soon as they got restarted, Buckley ended up laying him the fuck out with that kick. So I wasn't super jazzed about that. I also think that plays into it a little bit, unfortunately. But, that is what it is.
So to the both of you guys, it's worse when a ref steps in and is waving the fight off, and the fighter kind of somewhere in the gray area between, in his continuing motion, is attempting to land one punch, or even like is ignoring the ref a little bit. You think that's worse than when a fighter knocks his opponent out stiff and follows him to the ground and lands more hard shots before the ref couldn't get there?
Yes.
I think they're both not great.
I don't think the continuing motion. I think when it is blatantly after the ref stops you, like this was. We need
to be clear.
The next fight we're going to talk about, Diego Ferreira, knocked Michael Johnson very obviously out
and
cold,
yes, he apologized.
follows him with a shot, immediately feels bad and apologizes. To me, what Buckley did was worse than what Ferreira did.
Wow. Okay.
Dude, you have to understand that the intention behind what Buckley did, the walking over, it was like people, you talk about it all the time, Mike, like how you would prefer guys to knock guys out, do the Mark Hunt, right, and just walk away.
Walk off,
Buckley
man.
did the motherfucking opposite. He knocked the dude out, walked forward, and tried to hit him again. Like it was
stepped over him.
Yeah, dude, it was for me, it was a bad look. I don't think it was necessary. I think he would have looked harder just walking away, and it would have been a cooler look.
Okay. Yeah, let's move on. Speaking of, should we do we even get to match up Buckley?
We did not.
Okay, do it.
I'm curious where
I
you
couldn't
put
decide
him.
exactly what I wanted to do with Buckley, but am I crazy to say Matt Brown? Like, I think that's a pretty cool fight, and I kind of would like to see Buckley tested against like a gritty dude like that at welterweight and see how he comes out of it.
I feel like I would say that, but flipped around, I would say Matt Brown would be tested against Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's such a.
Would they not?
Like, yeah.
You're saying like you think Brown would be a big underdog?
Yes, I do.
Interesting.
I also think that, at least on paper, I think he would be. Buckley's a flashy dude, man, and he gets results. And it's not to say, and it's not to say Matt Brown doesn't, but I'm sure there's guys out there that are going to handicap it the same way Mike does, where he's like, Matt Brown's old as fuck, you know?
I mean, that's why I said, am I crazy to say Matt Brown? But the way he looks, I'm kind of like...
He's been fighting very well.
I'd be interested.
I kind of want to see Buckley against Jake Matthews. Am I crazy for this? Am I wild for this thought?
No, that's...
Because I feel like
that's what I mean. You could go a lot of places with Buckley. It's hard to gauge exactly, what to do with
Yeah, when a guy exits a division with a little bit of hype, like he had some hype at middleweight, but then like it didn't go exactly as planned. And then
like he also kind of lost a bunch, so it's like
yeah. But now it's kind of interesting of like what you do with him at this new weight class.
But you got to stick him in at this point, though, right? He hasn't done anything significantly crazy as far as where to put him in the rankings higher than what he's earned in that specific division. So you got to put him right above Fialho. And I'm curious where Mark has Fialho, right? It's got to be in the 40s or the 30s, somewhere in the low 30s or something like that.
It's lower than that. So Fialho is 48 for me, and I have Buckley in at 44.
Oh, you have him even okay. I figured you put him at least one spot higher than the other, but that's interesting. You have him a few spots different. Okay, where do you have Jake Matthews? I'm curious.
27.
Oh, that's a lot higher than I. Okay, sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean Jake has legit welterweight wins.
He does.
He does.
Like
he's. I feel like he's what? He's 1-2 though in his last 3 fights. It's been on a. He's been on a bumpy ride.
Yeah, that Semmelsberger loss, I still can't get over, man.
Yeah, that was a bad one, dude. That was a bad one.
That one hurt.
That was the
Let me
end
say
of
one more
McGregor,
thing,
Jake
though.
Matthews.
I wanted to say one more thing about the whole late punch thing. I could just picture if we were to have any fighter on as a guest. One day, some fighter will say this to us on this show. You know what I'm going to say?
No.
It's part of the game. It's fighting.
Kind of that, and also like, you've never done it. You've never fought. I'm not a professional fighter. And I'm sure, I believe that, yes, it is very fast in there, and it happens very fast. And it's what we see as spectators is happening a lot slower than it is for them in the cage. So that's just my big caveat on all of it. Even when like the Jeremy Stevens of the world, who like will knock a guy out and then jump on him and like do an elbow drop to a stiff guy, it's happening super fast for him, and there's a ton of emotion and a ton of adrenaline. So I'm just playing devil's advocate to myself, and
but that's always been my point though. I feel like that's been our point when you talk about how you don't like the additional shots landed afterwards. My point to you is usually the referee's not there. Like that's not, you know what I mean? That's I understand your moral view of it, right? Like you can tell a dude is out and you should not be hitting him additionally. We have seen moments where guys kind of like Bisping, for example, right? Bisping versus Anderson is a great example. Bisping was half dead. No one followed up any shots, right? Mike, you were like, in your opinion, you probably would have thought that's a good knockout right there. Anderson should walk away, and then we're done with that. Bisping was literally folded over like a fucking lawn chair and was like breathing heavily, right? Had Anderson went in and like killed him, Anderson still would have won that fight. We wouldn't have probably the sequence of events that led up afterwards, but he didn't. And now he has to pay for that because that's now a loss on his record. Now there's the argument to be made that he let the rest of the fight like go and all this other stuff. But
he couldn't.
But my point is,
he couldn't have.
Was it at the horn?
It was at the horn. It's a flying knee at the horn.
Yeah.
I thought there was fuckery though before the horn.
No, that was the fuckery. And Anderson
like him at the horn.
Right. And Anderson ran off like he walked off, had a walk-off knockout.
Yeah.
I see.
It's okay. There are other examples that I see what you're saying.
Yes. But right. So I think that especially the referee has to be the deciding factor. That is literally the point of even having that dude in there in the first place. And so if you're gonna be in that position, what Buckley did was blatant and ridiculous. And it's not The Diego Ferreira thing, I have no problem with that. That shit does happen. And people are in the middle of motions and are in the middle of a fight and things happen. I totally get that. But now, had that happened while the referee's standing in between them with a hand on Ferreira pushing him back, yeah, I'd have a fucking problem with that. 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Let us move on.
Mike, when we're late on this show later, just know it was because you took us on 10 minutes of a ride about all these stoppages. It's your fault.
It's true.
Hey, if you're watching this right now, let us know down in the comments what you think about blows after a guy is knocked out, or if a ref is trying to intervene and things like that happen. Let us know what you guys think down below. Okay. One more. Opening the main card UFC Fight Night in the lightweight division, Carlos Diego Ferreira defeated Michael Johnson by knockout. The official time, 1 minute, 50 seconds of the second round. Omar, start us off this time. Give us your take of the performances of these two gentlemen, and ultimately the finish that ended the fight and ended Michael Johnson's night.
I felt bad for Mark. That was my initial reaction. I know that was a painful watch for him, but that was pretty much what I expected as far as the reliability of Michael Johnson. I don't trust that dude. I just
But you
don't.
thought he'd get tapped, not KO'd.
Yeah.
No, I thought he dropped the ball, period. I just thought Ferreira had more tools on the ground. It wasn't like I thought, that if Ferreira didn't get a sub that he wasn't going to win. I don't trust Johnson past the first round. That dude is hype. That dude is crazy. He's very, very sharp in the first round. And just like Shahbazyan, once 2 and 3 come, he usually shits the bed. Now, I say this fully knowing that I think he came off of 3 straight wins, but not guys like this, not these types of fighters. And anytime he gets put in these situations, Diego Ferreira has been away for a little while, but that dude is still a beast. You know what I mean? He may never be champion, but he's not a guy that's just all of a sudden going to be number 40 in the division either. You know what I mean? So this is what I expected. I trust him about as much as I trust a house that doesn't decorate on Halloween. Like, 0.
That's a new one. Yeah, this was pain for me in multiple ways. I always throw a small bet on an entire card parlay just for the fuck of it in case it hits. And I got every fight right on the full card except for this fucking one. So that hurt. And then it also hurt as a fan of Michael Johnson because he was looking so fucking good. He was doing exactly what I thought he could do. The speed was an X factor. Ferreira was eating 2 strikes every time he threw one. I actually even thought Ferreira looked kind of sloppy and rusty, to be honest. He shot a couple takedowns, and Michael Johnson just shucked him away. And I'm sitting there like, damn, I fucking nailed this thing. Like, he literally, there was one where he threw Ferreira to the side when he tried for a takedown. And then one shot, and the fight's over. Like, he had literally lost the whole fight, and one shot, and Michael Johnson was absolutely dead in the cage. I mean, that was one of the most immediate turnoffs I've ever seen. Like, he was out cold when he was still standing straight up. His body had not started falling yet, and he was out cold.
Yep.
So
he was shut off.
I mean, incredible job from Ferreira to find that shot in a fight that wasn't necessarily going his way. Obviously, a big return to action for him. And, another one on the list of Michael Johnson looking good and then finding a way to not win the fight.
Yeah, man.
Johnson needs to do more with his defense. We know that he can strike. We know that he has power. We know he has speed. We know he has footwork. But and you can go back to like his any of his fights really, and if you slow them down in a lot of his exchanges, he has really bad tendencies, man. He does not put his hands back to his face. He drops his fucking jab all the time after he throws it. It's like basic shit, but the reality is the kid is usually so fast. A lot of these guys don't have the speed to return as effectively as you would imagine that they should. But that's why it's round 1 for me. I don't think Michael Johnson will lose a round 1 unless somebody really catches him, I guess. But Michael Johnson will always be the best in round 1. afterwards his flaws and his holes will show more and more as he slows down. And he doesn't have Khabib cardio, right? Like he doesn't have these, or not even Khabib cardio, but like these intense cardios that allow these guys to go at the same pace all the time, right? He's not a Brandon Royval. He's not any of these guys. So the more the fight goes on, the more his flaws show. And that's why I can't trust him, dude, because he also doesn't knock people out in round 1 either.
All right. Let's talk about what's next for the winner here, Diego Ferreira. Mark, you have any names? Where do you go with him next?
I'll make an assumption in my matchmaking, which is that I am going to assume that Joel Alvarez can get past Mark Jacasey, who he is fighting soon. And if so, I think Joel Alvarez and Diego Ferreira would be a really fun fight.
Okay. Omar, you have any other ideas?
No, actually, I really like that. I like that fight. That's a very good fight.
Let us now jump into our lightning round. If you don't know, our lightning round is where I challenge Mark and Omar to give me their quick lightning takes over the results for the rest of
It took
these
a while on those recaps, Omar. Let's try to really lightening this thing so we have time for our rankings.
Let's do it.
We'll do our best.
Okay, in the featured bout of the prelims for UFC Fight Night, Mackenzie Dern versus Angela Hill. In the lightweight division, Vyacheslav Borshov defeats Haiser Mahashate, Gesundheit, thank you, by TKO in the second round. Marco.
Mahashate gave Borshov the fight he wanted, which is what I expected him to do. He was willing to stand and strike with him. Round 1 was actually pretty competitive. Obviously, Borshov won it right at the end with the knockdown and the flurry. And then round 2, he kind of got more comfortable, settled in, started landing big shots, and he put Mahashate away with a monster combo. So great job by him to recover from what looked like a really bad eye poke in that fight, and obviously gets himself a big-time knockout.
Omar.
Bro, that was like one of those eye pokes you see in the movie where they start bleeding and you're like, that shit doesn't happen. It definitely did. It definitely did. It's a great performance, man. I won't repeat a lot of the things that Mark said, but I'm not really sure what was better, the finish or the dance at the end, because I feel like at this point, that's really what I want to watch. That's really the reason I want to see that man win, is because I like that fucking dance at the end. It's so sick.
Yeah. His striking is filthy. If he can keep working the wrestling, and he's far away at this point, but if he can get it to an interesting level, he will be an interesting fighter.
Yeah.
Okay, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, UD over Vanessa Demopoulos. Omar, go.
Yeah, I mean, we knew Demopoulos is a tough girl, but Carolina looked good, man. You know, I don't know what's going on with her and what she's found internally to give her the motivation to come back almost arguably stronger than what she looked before, but she looked great. She looked really, really good, and I think she took that fight pretty handedly there. I think she really outclassed Demopoulos in a lot of different ways. I think Demopoulos wasn't able to put any of her game into play, which she normally wants to take things down to the ground. And Kowalkiewicz looked absolutely fantastic. I'm happy for her.
Okay.
Yeah, Demopoulos started off hot early, but Carolina took control after the first couple minutes and never really gave it back. The reach was a big factor for her. She was continually landing on Vanessa before Vanessa could get to her. The right hand over the top to conclude exchanges was landing for Carolina all fight long. There was more heat on her shots. It was just a very clean battering all around for Kowalkiewicz.
Okay, at a catch weight of 172.5 pounds, Gilbert Urbina defeats Orion Koski. Did I say that right? By TKO.
Kosi, I guess.
Kosi? Yeah, I think so.
Kosi is what they were
TKO.
saying on the broadcast.
Yeah.
Okay, by TKO in round number 2. Mark, take it.
Gilbert Urbina looked great, man, in every single aspect. Honestly, better than he ever looked in Tough, in my opinion.
Yep.
I didn't think the guy I watched on Tough had that game to show. He was using his length. He had a beautiful takedown. He was an aggressive grappler. He was looking to punish Kosi on the ground. It was really a strong welterweight debut for him, and it never even felt like Kosi was in that fight to me. So a nice finish at the end with the rib damage. It was all around strong from Urbina.
Omar.
Yeah, dude. I have to agree with Mark. That's by far the best Gilbert Urbina we've seen. I mean, the striking I thought was really sound. He used his distance really well. He didn't overexert himself. He didn't overreach with his strikes as well, because he had Kosei up against the cage a lot of the time, but he was able to still strike, keep him against the cage without losing any of his balance or any of his position. So I've never, he was very sloppy, I feel like, beforehand, right? He used to spam a lot of hooks, not really using his jab a ton, very street brawler-ish, if you will. And I thought he looked really good in this, man. I thought he looked a lot more measured, a lot more technical, and it maybe has something to do with the fact that maybe he can train now full-time, maybe there's changing in his life or whatever, but his dedication to himself getting better has been very, very evident. I'm really excited to see where he goes from here.
Okay. In the heavyweight division, Rogerio Nascimento defeats Ilir Latifi by a split decision. Omar, staying with you. You go first.
Yeah, this was an interesting fight, man. I commend Latifi for continuously fighting guys that are taller than him, because I feel like every one of them in the world is. But he just, he fights in a way that just looks so uncomfortable, but I feel like that's how he has to fight and how he always fights. But he's like always trying to reach for these guys, man, and he has such trouble getting them, especially if they can get a little bit of distance between them, if they have decent hands, and especially if Latifi can't take him down, you know. And he had some success throughout that fight, bringing Nascimento down to the ground. He uses wrestling quite a bit in round 2, if I remember it right, and was able to pull a few nice takedowns and control him from the ground for quite some time. But I think there's just too much energy that's exerted from Latifi because of how big these dudes are. And I just don't think he can keep that pace up for an entire fight for it to really make a significant difference, with guys that are that much bigger than him. So I did have Nascimento winning this fight. I had him winning rounds 1 and 3. I had Latifi winning round 2. I thought it was the right call. I am a little surprised. What did that ref give him? They gave Latifi round 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't feel like he won round 3.
I didn't at all.
Yeah, I'm not really sure I know this is supposed to be, I'm a piece of shit. I'm sorry. I need to see what they did on the on the MMA decisions really quick, and then we'll move on. Yeah. Almost 62% of these people thought that Nascimento won.
I mean, that's way lower than it should be. Like, I didn't think that round was close. I don't understand it.
Yeah, round 4 specifically, they have it at almost 40% for Latifi. So yeah, I'm not really sure either. I didn't watch it the second time. I did watch it only one time, but yeah, I had Nascimento winning that fight. Sorry.
Yeah, I did too. I thought Latifi was way too willing to back up right from the opening bell, and I get it. He was at a huge reach disadvantage. He was probably trying to, stay out of getting jabbed, but you could argue that's even more reason that he should have been crowding Nascimento as opposed to backing up. And he finally was kind of walking forward toward the very end of the fight, and he was having success. So you wonder what could have happened if he did that earlier. It was a fairly close fight, as Omar said. Latifi did work the wrestling in round 2. He was chopping the legs. He was trying to slow Nascimento down. But all in all, I just thought he got backed up too much, and he ate way too many hands from Nascimento. And I thought the judge that gave Latifi round 3 was an idiot. To be frank.
Okay. Natalie Silva, round 1 knockout over Victoria Leonardo. Mark, go first.
Wait, how are you just going to do that to the
Oh,
to
my
the
bad.
Chase
Oh, damn.
It's a baby Askren. How are you going to do that?
Baby Askerman, lightweight division, Chase Hooper defeats Nick Fior by unanimous decision. Mark, take it.
Look, I don't have a great gauge on exactly how good Nick Fiore is. Fiore, I think they were saying. Like, obviously he can grapple, but I'm not entirely sure beyond that. But with that being said, that was still easily the most comfortable we have ever seen Chase Hooper on the feet. He was super aggressive. His hands seemed faster. He was still a little bit reckless with where he puts his head in certain exchanges. But I really liked the progression that we saw from him. And, of course, the grappling is always there. and this was just a really solid win for his lightweight debut. And he looked good at the weight, I thought, too.
Omar.
Yeah, so my take's going to be a little bit different. I'm not really sold on that performance at all. It was a good performance. There's no denying it's probably one of the better performances that we've seen from Chase Hooper, especially when it comes to the stand-up and his aggression. But there's been like some takes where like this, like this Chase Hooper, this is the Chase Hooper that's going to make the top 15. This is the Chase Hooper that's going to go far. And in my head, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that?
You have the same take. We're saying the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a good performance, but like, if you really, really break it down, right? A lot of what made that performance fun and exciting and like what you would consider a really good performance is a lot of the pressure and a lot of the strikes that he was able to volume and put together, right? How many people do you really think that shit's going to work against? I mean, honestly.
Yeah, no.
Like, it's at a lower level, that's fine. Nick Fiore didn't look like he had any answer to anything, which I don't really know what that means. Like Chael was said, I'm just sharing this for you so that you understand. Right? I don't know what it means. But I feel like, and I felt like this as soon as the fight was over, that as good as he looked, if that fight happened at somebody with any pick a fucking name, like pick a card, top 15, I think he gets demolished with that performance, personally.
Yeah, like top 40 probably. Like for what it's worth. I have inserted Chase Hooper as my number 66 lightweight. Like I'm certainly not talking about any rankings for Chase Hooper here. I'm just saying for himself, he showed some nice progression.
The internet is a wild place. It's a wild place.
It is.
All right. Natalie Silva, round 1 knockout over Victoria Leonardo. Omar, go.
Listen. Talia Silva hit this girl with a little ooh-wee. I mean, she fucked her up. Mike, you know that noise. The ooh-wee. You know that noise. All too well.
Quite a bit.
Bro, she was piecing this girl up. There were no single shots in this fight. There were 2 hit combos, 3 hit combos. Oh, look, it's a head kick. Oh, look, it's another one. I mean, Silva was basically just having a good old time out there, not having to worry about nothing, bouncing around, having a great time. And she absolutely slaughtered Leonardo. I loved that performance, and I hope she continues that momentum because she looked savage in there. Absolutely savage.
Mark.
Yeah, I was high on Natalia Silva already. Now I'm like, I don't even, what's after high, because I'm that. Like, she is a killer. That's back-to-back knockouts. Her speed was on a totally different plane than what Leonardo was. I mean, it helps that I think Leonardo's kind of slow. But she could barely even enter without eating combos to the dome. I mean, she just got worked, and it didn't take long. A couple huge combos from Silva over the span of 30 seconds or so to end that thing, and Leonardo's face was a wreck. So, yeah, great showing for her. And personality-wise, she kind of feels like she's like Amanda Ribas 2.0.
Huh. All right, one more. Themba Gorimbo UD over Takashi Sato. Mark, go.
How about the pace that Themba Gorimbo pushes? Talking about pace earlier in the show. My goodness. I'm not exactly sure how high level his wrestling and grappling is. I think it didn't matter so much against Sato because the pace alone was just giving him problems. And I'm sure we'll give other guys problems as well. And then obviously he showed off the hands at the end. Not at the end. Showed off the hands in round 2, almost knocking out Sato. It looked like he had him. But either way, really nice bounce-back win for Gorimbo after what was a disappointing debut after he kind of talked some smack coming into the UFC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Omar?
Yeah, I wanted to like the performance more than I did. I thought it was kind of like a slow movie of sorts. He did have a good pace. He had a crazy pace throughout the entire fight. Definitely something that I think is to look out for. So, he obviously trains with Colby Covington, so I'm not completely surprised that that's the direction that he goes into when he fights. I don't know how long that's really going to work. His takedowns and his takedown approaches were not 100%, right? There's a lot of flaws in his takedown attempts there and his approach to his entries. And I feel like we've seen a lot of times, especially with the higher levels, that guys who don't enter correctly end up eating shit as a result. Colby Covington can sometimes even have... Colby Covington had that approach, I feel like, earlier on in his career. Later on, you could see he relies on the double sometimes, but he's fairly okay and comfortable just pushing you back against the cage and then just kind of pushing you against the cage and using that as a way to mess with you and take you down and things like that, as opposed to just shooting in nakedly, so to say, and potentially eating a knee or an uppercut or, you know, getting Curtis Blades or something like that. So I'm not sold on Garimbo. I understand what his game is. I understand where he's coming from. I just don't know how long that's his specific approach to that game plan will work towards guys at the top.
Me and you had a lot of the same reads on a lot of these fights. I mean, you said that way more eloquently than me, but that's what I was meaning when I said I'm not exactly sure how high level that the grappling and wrestling was there.
Yeah. It's always nice when we agree.
All right, well, that does it for our lightning round. And that does it for our recap of this UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill. And now let's put a bow on this one by finding out who rose and fell in Mark's own rankings system that we call the Priaulx Rankings. Mark?
Let's do it. Decent amount of movement this week, to be honest. We have 5 risers and 3 fallers. So let's start with the fallers. Anyone who moved like 4 or 5 spots, I put on the list. So we have Orion Cosey fell from number 64 to 69 at welterweight. He is now 1-2 in the UFC, so he'll probably get another shot to right the ship, which he will have to do. Alir Latifi falls from number 16 to number 20 at heavyweight. Feels like he's probably peaked at this point. I can't imagine him making any run back up at this point in his career. I know he's even hinted at retirement possibly, so we'll see what he does. Takashi Sato, very similar boat. He has been higher at times in his career, but he now fell from number 53 to 59 in my welterweight ranks after the loss to Garimbo. Going to the risers, Temba, I should say, was at number 71 after his debut. He moves up to number 58 in my welterweight ranks off of his win. He's now 1-1 in the UFC. The boy Gilbert Urbina, debuting in my welterweight ranks at number 64. Vyacheslav Borshov moving from number 70 to 63 at lightweight as he now moves to 2-2 in the UFC. And then the more relevant ones. Lupi Godinez moves from number 19 to number 15 in my women's strawweight rankings. I actually meant to look at the UFC's rankings to see if she cracked it, but I forgot to. Let's see. She did not. Who do they have that I don't? Oh, it's because I hate the UFC so much. They have Amanda Ribas still in the strawweight ranking. She hasn't fought a strawweight fight in fucking 2 years. Yeah. So I wonder if it'd be Lupi they got in if they took Ribas out. But anyway, Lupi is my number 15. And then the last one, Anthony Hernandez, moves from number 27 up to number 19 in my middleweight rankings.
Wow.
Knocking on the door of the ranks.
Let's fucking go, Fluffy. Let's go.
Man.
And that is it for the ranks
Bro,
this
could
week.
you imagine if this kid just secretly becomes fucking champion one day, just out of left field?
Secretly?
Just no one knows.
Dude,
Does this tell anybody?
He looks physically better every fight, too. Like his actual body composition. Like there was a time where he was fluffy, and he's not that anymore.
His cardio, though, has seemingly just always been something that he can rely on. You know what I mean? Fluffy or not. He's
Yeah.
It looks crazy, man. It's good. And I think he lost a lot of, or at least at the time, I think he lost some shine because of the Kevin Holland knockout. You know what I mean? Like he got worked pretty quickly in that fight, ate a knee, and you know, Kevin Holland goes on to steal all that shine, all that attention. But Fluffy has really bounced back quite well since then, and he looks fucking good, man. He looks really good.
For sure. Yes.
Oh, it's my turn. Hey,
Yeah, man. Let's
pass the
do
ball.
inside the MMA sphere.
Boom.
Talk to me.
Welcome,
Talk
gentlemen.
to me.
Welcome back in the sphere. It's good to see you. So we don't really have a ton of stuff, to be honest. It's been a slow news week, so we'll just go through a couple of highlights really quickly, and then we'll get to some fight announcements, and then we will move into our all-times lists updates. So first on the list, Cain Velasquez's attempted murder trial date has been delayed now until August. It is the third requested postponement for the trial date. I guess they still need more time to get evidence or whatever the hell. But as of right now, it looks like we're not going to be getting any kind of movement on this stuff until August. Next on the list, if you guys remember, Here Comes the Boom. It was a pretty decently funny movie that I still tend to rewatch from time to time, with Kevin James playing a teacher who becomes a UFC fighter to try and save the music school or the music program inside of the school that he works for. Really good movie, really funny movie. Very rare for the UFC to actually partner and brand them, put their brand out inside of a movie. If you've ever watched movies like Warrior or something like that, it's never the UFC. It's always some random fucking whoever type company. UFC is very, very picky.
Though.
It was a good film. Super dramatic, but it was a great film.
If you haven't seen Warrior, go fucking watch it. I love that movie.
There was a movie that that the wife and I watched with I forget the dude's name. The dude from the Boondock Saints, the one of the brothers, Sean Connolly, Sean Patrick something or another. I don't remember. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Sean.
But he
Patrick
did a.
Connolly, is he a three-namer? That might be it.
It might be, but he did a movie where he played. It was like an OG BJJ guy, and this was like before the UFC was like a big thing, and how he was taking like fights in kind of like these like sketchy areas for a lot of money. It's a depressing fucking movie. They don't need to make these movies that depressing. You know what I mean?
Sean
there should
Patrick
be a little
Flannery,
not Connolly. Okay.
Yes,
But the movies are really depressing from time to time, and it makes me sad. Warrior was super fucking dramatic and not really fun. A great movie, but like you don't turn to it to have a good time. You know what I mean? So I say all that to roundaboutly say that Dana White is actually partnering up with Adam Sandler for a new movie involving the UFC, which, if it's anything like the Kevin James movie, should be fairly fun to watch. So I'm kind of excited to see what comes of that.
all right.
A little bit of information here on the Mackenzie Dern situation. So we all know that she is going through a divorce. Things are a little contentious. I know she was also complaining about this camp because of the Luke Rockhold thing, the BKFC fight. It actually took Priaulx away from her during her camp, which she wasn't thrilled about. But all in all, that's to say she ended up, it ended up still working out for her. But apparently there are a lot of things that are going on with her relationship that she decided to go public with, as far as the police have been involved in their house with domestic violence disputes. Basically, police getting called to the house, things in front of their daughter, arguing in front of their daughter. She's alleged him of physical and emotional abuse, slamming the door on her leg, and he allegedly tried to drag her out of the house during a fight. She petitioned for a domestic violence restraining order against him. Apparently there's videos that are involved as well. So shit is getting really contentious. Apparently the money aspect of this divorce is really where things have begun to really heat up as of late. So it's been a wild ride. It looks like Mackenzie, though, is the primary custodian of her baby. But yeah, it's not looking great, and I think we kind of saw a little bit of the wrath that Mackenzie Dern has kind of probably been bottling up for quite some time, and Angela Hill was just at the wrong place at the wrong time, as far as I'm concerned. But that's all we have as far as news is concerned. Like I said, pretty slow news week. We're just going to jump into a couple of these fight announcements, which we don't also have a ton of, and we will get moving right along.
I'm gonna make a
Ludovic
quick
Klein
phone
is
call
out.
while you announce these fights.
A what?
Okay.
I'm going to make a quick phone call while you announce these fights.
Do it.
Ludovic Klein is out against his fight with Jared Gordon, or Jim Miller, I should say. Jim Miller will now be facing Jared Gordon at UFC Vegas 74 on June 3rd. Pat Sabatini versus Lucas Almeida has been added to UFC Vegas 75 on June 17th. Kevin Lee versus Renat Fakhretdinov has been added to UFC Vegas 76 on July 1st. That will be Kevin Lee's return fight here to the UFC. Terrence McKinney versus Nazim Sadikov has been added to UFC Vegas 77 on the July 15th card, along with Albert Duraev versus Jun Young Park. Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Kyler the Matrix Phillips has been added to the UFC's August 5th card. Virna Jandiroba, as we alluded to earlier, has been matched up with Tatiana Suarez for her return to the UFC after some time off, and that will again be going down August 5th, along with Dustin Jacoby versus Kennedy Nzechukwu, and that is all we have this week for fight announcements.
Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Mark is on the phone.
I'll say, should we just superimpose Mark into the picture and just...
No, I'm here.
Just fake it.
Okay, boys. Let us now talk about our all-time flyweight top 10. Before we get into our top 10s, does anybody have any honorable mentions that they would like to throw out there?
I just want to point out this list,
just fucking right in.
this weight class was particularly difficult, and I had a really hard time. And the longer that I had to look at this list, the longer I had to keep fucking with it. The easiest, I even think, the easiest was probably the top 4 or 5, and even then, trying to figure out what Jenga pieces to put them in was also a pain in my ass. But it got weirder from 6 all the way down. And
totally
a lot
agree.
of guys that I started with on my list ended up being in my honorable mentions by the end of it as I tried to reason things. But here we go.
We had really similar experiences. That was like the exact description of my feelings as well.
My honorable mentions are Tim Elliott, Sergio Pettis, and Kyoji Horiguchi. Those are my 3 ones there, mainly because while they had a slight impact at flyweight, they have also spent a significant amount of time and significant more success at bantamweight. So it's hard to really stuff them into the top 10 of the actual flyweight division. So that was my big thing there.
Mark?
All right. I'll say just super briefly, there's a lot of like modern day guys, because I feel like this division's not that old. Like Royval and Cara France and Askarov and Manel Kopp. Like there's a lot of guys like that who in another couple years could be relevant on this list, but they're not there yet, so I couldn't consider guys like that. So I have a few more honorables than Omar did. I'll do one as kind of like a trio, which is the old school trio of Shinichi Kojima, Yasuhiro Urushitani, and Mamoru Yamaguchi. They are all like 3 legends in Japanese MMA. They were kind of like the first flyweight studs in a way. Urushitani actually does have a win over a very early in his career, John Dotson. He split a series with Yamaguchi. Kojima beat Yamaguchi. They were all great. I'm sure you'll find lists where at least one of them, if not more, is in the top 10. I just couldn't pull that trigger. I feel like you do have to factor in the quality of competition at least a little bit. They all do have plenty of losses to some random guys mixed in there, so I couldn't justify jumping them into my top 10 or even putting them over my other 2 honorable mentions. So that is them as a trio. My next guy, who I guess would be number 12, is Adriano Moraes. It does feel a bit weird to me to not have a guy who knocked out Demetrius Johnson in the top 10. Not to mention he's the only guy to ever finish DJ, bantamweights included. So it's one hell of a feather in his cap, and it's why he's, I guess, in my honorables. But Aside from that, I just felt like his resume is not incredibly deep. It's a very similar situation to why Holly Holm was not in my top 10, despite having the knockout of Ronda. And not to mention, yes, he's a flyweight in one, but if he ever had to actually make 125, I'm not sure he could. So
I don't think
feel
he could ever make 125.
Yeah, I feel okay leaving him out. And then my last honorable mention is a wild one to me, in that I never expected to leave him out of my top 10 until I started digging into guys' resumes. Especially considering he's the first person I ever really remember viewing as like the quote-unquote king of the flyweights. And that man is Uncle Creepy, Ian McCall. Back when he was in Tachi Palace fights, beating Jussier Formiga, he was the man. He was the top flyweight in the world. But not a lot happened after that, if we're being honest. And Formiga went on to build a resume that certainly surpassed McCall's, in my opinion. Of course, McCall did have that infamous draw with Demetrius Johnson in the UFC, but he then lost the rematch. He lost to Benavidez, lost to Lineker, lost to Kopp, lost to Horiguchi. There wasn't much else on that resume. And it's not like he was old when he was losing all those fights. He was 27 when he lost to DJ, and he was 33 by the time he was done. So that should have been his prime. So to me, there was just not enough depth on his resume, despite the fact that he was once the top man. So he just missed my top 10.
Okay. I'll throw a couple names out there for my honorables. I also have Moraes in my honorables, and I'll throw in Ian McCall in my honorables. At one time was a very hot fighter, very popular guy. Utterly derailed by fight cancellations. I pulled up a stat that
That boy was plagued by injuries, man. Ian McCall's body was not okay.
Yes.
He'd been booked for 6 consecutive fights that were canceled, 4 of which were canceled during the week of the fight. I mean, come on.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know it was that bad. But yeah, I remember him consistently being plagued with injuries, especially his hands. His hands were constantly fucked up almost all the time.
Who would like to go first? 10 through... Mark, why don't you lead us off?
Me, huh?
Lead us off with the energy.
All right. Let's do it. Number 10, the Magician, John Dodson. In a way, it feels like Dodson is like a little bit of a journeyman, or at least that's how he feels to me. I don't know if that's how he feels to you guys, and I personally never expected to be putting him in this top 10 when I started doing this list. Like, I would have said McCall over him if you had asked me before I really looked at it. But when you stop and think about it, pretty much all of the John Dodson up and downs happened at bantamweight. All of his UFC losses, other than the 2 title fights against DJ, were at bantamweight. And at flyweight, it's just those 2. And then it's wins over Tim Elliott, over Zach Makovsky, a KO of Montague, a TKO of Moraga, a TKO of Formiga, which is Ian McCall's best win, and Dodson did it even better than him. So, and then there's even bantamweight wins, too, over guys like Wineland and Munoz and a young TJ Dillashaw, of course. So I could see people not loving the Dodson inclusion, and feel free to let me know in the comments if you're listening and you want to argue it, but I had a hard time leaving him out of my 10. Not to mention he's never been finished, not one time in his life, at any weight, and is still knocking out dudes in Ryzen as we speak. So he is my number 10 fighter. Moving right along, number 9, Alexandre Pantoja. This was my modern-day resume, not quite complete yet type of inclusion, but it's with good reason. I mean, let's start with the fact that he's 2-0 against Brandon Moreno, who is obviously going to be a lot higher up on this list. Yes, one of them was on tough, but to both of those men, I'm sure they feel their record is 2-0 and 0-2. And he's currently on his best run of all. He beat Manel Kopp. He tapped Brandon Royval. He tapped Alex Perez. Yes, he's gotten beat by Figgy and by Askarov and even Dustin Ortiz early in his career. But the dude has 25 wins. He's 25-5. He's another one who's never once been finished. And you factor in the quality of the losses and the depth of the resume, along with 2 wins over Moreno, which he'll try to make 3 very soon. And I'm comfortable having him in the top 10 here. So he comes in at 9 for me. Number 8, a man that Omar left off, Kyoji Horiguchi. I love Kyoji, man. I always have. I always will. He is a guy, as Omar mentioned, who has spent a lot of his career fighting at 135, despite being continually undersized there since he's a natural flyweight. And he's still beating top bantamweights like Kaya Sakura. He has a one-on-one series with him. Darian Caldwell twice back when he was the Bellator champ. I mean, he's got a record of 31-5, and only one of those losses is at flyweight, which is his true weight class, and it's to Demetrius Johnson. So one flyweight loss, and it's the DJ. He did also lose to Sergio Pettis at bantamweight, who you could kind of look at as a fellow flyweight, but even still then call it 2 losses. And at flyweight, he's beaten Oigi Kubo 3 times. He KO'd Ian McCall. He subbed Manel Kopp. He beat Ali Bagautinov, who's another guy with a solid flyweight resume. And he was 7-1 as a flyweight in the UFC. So, again, you can nitpick as to why a lot of these guys do or not belong. As Omar mentioned, it was kind of tough to stack these guys out, but for me, the fact that he never loses at his actual weight class of flyweight was enough for me to put him on this list. So he comes in at 8 for me. Number 7, definitely my most surprising one to myself, Sergio Pettis. The current Bellator bantamweight champion. Never would have thought I'd have him this high until I looked at it. I know some people might hate it. Another one, let me know in the comments. But I feel like it's pretty easy to forget this man's resume. Like, he did get knocked out by Ryan Benoit. So let's get that one out of the way. Not a good loss. But that aside, his only other flyweight losses are Henry Cejudo and Jussier Formiga. He beat John Moraga. He beat Brandon Moreno. He beat Joseph Benavidez. And granted, it was up a weight class, but he KO'd the man I just talked about in Kyoji Horiguchi. So all in all, he's got one bad loss at flyweight and wins over Moreno, Formiga, Benavidez, Horiguchi. That's a pretty damn good resume that I feel like is easy to forget about for Sergio Pettis. So it's another guy, like I said, I hadn't really thought of being on this list, but once I dug in, I was like, well, I guess he's on here. So he comes in at 7 for me. And then to round out this first half of the top 10, my number 6 is Jussier Formiga. We finally hit the other half of the original flyweight kings, at least my original flyweight kings, in terms of him and McCall. He was the man in the late 2000s. He beat Kojima, who I talked about in my honorables. He beat a young Pantoja. He did lose to McCall, but then after that, he put together one hell of a UFC career. He did get beat. You know, Dotson finished him. Benavidez finished him twice. He lost to Cejudo and Moreno. But the resume of wins is large. I mean, Kojima, Pantoja, Yamaguchi, Cariaso, Makovsky, Ortiz, Pettis, Figueiredo. Like, I just named 5 guys in my top 15 that Formiga has beaten. So I get it, he has some losses in there, but that's more than I can say for anyone I've said on this list thus far, and I think he should rightfully be this high on the list. So that is my number 6, and I will now pass the baton to whoever wants it.
So you had Formiga at 6, Sergio at 7.
Kyoji at 8. Pantoja at 9. Dotson at 10.
Pantoja at 9?
Yep.
Okay, Dotson. Omar. Do you think?
So my number 10 is Ian McCall.
I figured
And-
that you must have him on there.
Yeah, you know, I'll be honest. I think some of it has to do with my personal love for Ian McCall, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that that was how I personally was introduced to the flyweight division. You know, apart from Demetrius Johnson, if I look back to my earliest memories of the flyweight division, Ian McCall for me was one of those staples, very much like the Joseph Benavidez's and things like that. And he had a lot of potential, but you know, life really fucked that dude. You know, besides the fact that he had one of those, you know, he had an addiction to certain substances and things like that. He ended up getting over or working through. I don't know how that, you know, I'm sure that's not one of those things you get over necessarily. But one of the things he had to work through, and again, he had a ton of injuries consistently throughout his career, especially after the Demetrius fight more so than anything. So I feel like he was one of those guys that had a lot of potential in the flyweight division, was definitely a recognizable name, fought a ton of guys, but just even with all of those pullouts, he still fought a good amount of people in there, but he just never his body was never able to keep up with what I think he was able to do in his mind, which will always make me sad for him. But that was my number 10. Brandon Royval was actually one of the newer house names that I had at number 9. I think apart from his resume, as Mark has already talked about, Royval is one of those guys that, for me, his performances, I think, also say a large part about him as a fighter and where he deserves to be. I think he's one of those guys that is a very good and well-rounded fighter. I think he'll be around at the top of the division for quite some time. I don't know what his ceiling is, with his recklessness kind of being a big thing. He's not necessarily always better than the guys that he's beating necessarily, but he's always finding a way to beat guys that are better than him. And I think that his record right now is pretty strong. And like Mark was saying, the flyweight division is still so young, and I can't look too far back at a lot of these earlier flyweights, especially from the Japanese era, because the level of competition just isn't, it's just so far apart, right? Like I would never put Don Fry really in a greatest of all time, right? As much of a legend as he is, I would never put him in a greatest of all time, because I just don't think he's technically that great of a fighter. He was just in an era where his skill set was dominant because no one else had anything to really work with, right? So that's kind of how I feel about the earlier, the sort of the golden age, if you will, of the flyweight division. But I think Royval deserves to be in the number 9 spot. I think he's kind of worked his way to a point where I'm comfortable putting him there. And I had to think about the Kai Kara Francis and all this other stuff too, like Mark also mentioned. But I felt comfortable putting Royval there. I didn't feel comfortable putting Kai Kara Francis there. Number 8, I have Jussier Formiga. I won't run through a lot of the same things that Mark said, but Formiga's resume is extremely strong. This is one of those Jenga pieces I had a really difficult time figuring out where it really fit, what made the most sense. And a couple of these, all in all, I just tried to put them in a certain order and see how I felt about one being on top of the other. And if I felt comfortable enough with it, I just left it there. So I put Jussier Formiga right at number 8. I did put John Dodson right over him at number 7. Dodson is, again, another one of these guys that to me is synonymous with the flyweight division, and that is totally understanding that he's fought at 135 a lot more than I think he should have been. He recently returned to flyweight and recently took a body home with him. I think 125 is a great division for him. I think he was at a time where, and Demetrius Johnson talks about it all the time, how Dodson was arguably the toughest fight that he's ever had. And Dodson is probably one of the fastest human beings you'll see fighting, like, ever. And it's very difficult to not give him the respect that he deserves and what he's done in the early stages of the UFC flyweight division. And even now, out of the UFC's stage, still now going back to flyweight and still representing for that division. So I put Dodson at number 7. Number 6 is who I will always call the prince of the 125-pound division, Joseph Benavidez. Always the bridesmaids, never the bride. That man will always go down in my heart as the guy who was always at the tippy top of the division, but could just never grab onto that gold. And it kind of sucks, but he's a legend, man. He's a legend. He's had some great fights, some great finishes. I still think about the finish where he had the dude in a mounted guillotine with homeboy's legs and arms wrapped up, where this man was kicking to try to tap out because he had no other appendage to use to do so. One of the greatest things I've ever seen. I thought it was a fantastic performance. And it's things like that make me remember Joseph Benavidez, and his resume against guys who at the championship and elite levels and at the top of the division for like the longest time cannot be ignored. So Joseph Benavidez at number 6.
Okay, I start out my top 10 with Mr. John the Magician Dodson. First off, one of the best personality and nickname matches we've ever seen. That being said, at flyweight at 125 pounds and in the lighter weight classes in general, John Dodson, a tremendous talent, maybe a little bit before his time. His stint at flyweight in the UFC was tremendous. He had that early win over TJ Dillashaw and came quite close to defeating Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. As you guys have alluded to, he's one of the toughest opponents that Johnson has faced.
Yeah, he was up 2-0, if I remember right. And DJ had to come back and win them all.
Yeah.
Not to interject.
So, no, please do. So while his record does include losses to the likes of Johnson, his performances definitely have solidified his status as one of the top 125ers all time, in my opinion. I think he belongs within the top 10, even though he hasn't stacked up the accolades like some others have. For number 9, I have Jussier Formiga. Formiga, unfortunately, is one of these guys who holds this distinction of one of the greatest fighters ever to not compete for a title, let alone win one. So despite never even challenging for the belt, he has had a very impressive career, one of the truly great submission threats, in his record standing at 24-8, 11 subs. He has never been subbed in his whole career. He does have losses over guys like Joe B, but he does have some great career wins over guys like Davis and Figueiredo, Sergio Pettis, so that's why I have him at number 9. Number 8, I have a guy who is still active and doing big things at the very top of the flyweight division. That is Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja at my 8th spot, in just about a 5-year span in the UFC, he has left already a significant mark. He's one of the few guys who have beaten Brandon Moreno and still active and still wanting that fight. He's 25-5 right now with a 70% finish rate. And he's certainly, I think he's one of the best 125ers in the world right now. So he has victories, like I said, over Moreno, over Kopp, Kaikar France. So that's why I have him at number 8. My number 7 is Kyoji Horiguchi. Definitely has made his mark in the UFC, but he also has continued to showcase his talents as he has left the UFC and beyond. Went on to win championships with Ryzen and Bellator, defeating notable opponents like Ian McCall, Benel Kopp, Darian Caldwell. All right, and he also is the owner of an outstanding 13-fight win streak. So that's why I got Horiguchi sliding in at the 7th spot. And finishing my top 10 through 6, how do you say that? I have Sergio Pettis.
Wow, I thought I was high at 7. There you go.
Sergio Pettis initially faced some challenges in the UFC, but eventually found his stride. Has defeated prominent flyweights like Brandon Moreno and Joseph Benavidez, and has established himself as one of the best at 125 pounds in the world. He now is obviously in Bellator, where he continues to thrive and has held Bellator gold. I had to put him over Horiguchi because he knocked him out.
Yeah,
so that's
Mike,
rounding out my...
We had the same exact 5 men, just in a different order.
Funny. I will continue on if you guys would like me to.
Oh,
we can do sort of a round robin, and we'll do Omar, and then we'll end with Mark.
All right.
Coming in at number 5 for me is Joseph Benavidez. Like other fighters on this list, faced the dominant. Unfortunately, he was in the Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson era. It was his era. I think of John Jones being like, this is my era. Sorry, this is my era. That's what it was with DJ, man. And unfortunately, Joe B ran into that juggernaut. Despite his losses to Mighty Mouse, Benavidez has had an exceptional record and secured victories over other renowned names like Henry Cejudo, Jussier Formiga, and Ian McCall. So he has definitely left quite the legacy of flyweight. Number 4, here we go. I have at number 4, Davison Figueiredo. Figueiredo, the first ever 2-time UFC flyweight champion, initially flew under the radar, but now he proves his worth. He has proved his worth by capturing the gold more than once. He absolutely dominated guys like Joseph Benavidez in one-sided rivalries, and continued his success with victories over Alex Perez, and has beaten Brandon Moreno. Unfortunately, I couldn't have him higher than 4, as we will see, because of his rivalry with that man. But Figueiredo has been arguably, more than anybody on this list, I would say the biggest juggernaut at 125 pounds. A man at this lightweight class who I cringe to think about. He's like the boogeyman of the division, man. Other guys like Moreno, Cejudo, Johnson, Pettis, all these guys, Horiguchi, hard hitters, Pantoja, hard hitter. Nobody's like Figueiredo, man, at 125 pounds. That being said, for me, number 3 is Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno's storyline is that of an underdog who rose to the top. After being released by the UFC, he returned and went on quite an impressive run, ending with winning the flyweight title, going back and forth with Figueiredo, as we now know. And his accomplishments, the resilience that he's shown has been nothing short of inspiring. And he's one of the few men ever to hold the belt. And probably one of the most inspiring champions that I've seen in quite some time. My number 2 is Mr. Henry Cejudo. Obviously, he's Triple C. And while earlier in this list, I pointed out my number 10, I started out my list, with John Dodson being the best personality and nickname match. And towards the top of the list, I think Henry Cejudo is one of the worst personality and nickname matches that we've seen, with his nickname being The Messenger. Every time I see that his nickname is The Messenger, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that he has this weird nickname, The Messenger. Maybe there's some story behind it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Obviously, when we talk about accolades, guys further down the list like the Formigas, the Dodsons who lack those accolades, this is a guy who certainly has them. He's the Triple C. He has the multiple UFC titles going along with the Olympic gold, and that's why I have him so high at my number 2. And of course, number 1. Spoilers. The cat's out of the bag, guys. My number 1 is Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. Just incredible. He's one of the greatest of all time, let alone the greatest flyweight ever. Such an incredible run between 2012 and 2018 that established himself as one of the greats of all time, with a record of 12-0-1 during that period. He won the flyweight title, and he holds the record for most consecutive title defenses with 11. He defeated just about everybody. Several former and future champions, would-be future champions, and solidified his place among the absolute legends of the sport. Many people have him on their Mount Rushmores, etc., etc. DJ's the man. Okay, Omar, your top 5.
I'm dying to know who Omar has at 5 over Joseph Benavidez. It's blowing my mind who this person could be.
Do you guys want to know the random thought I just had?
Sure.
Yes.
Do you remember when they tried to sell us that Patrick Cummins might beat DC?
Yes. They had to promote
What
it.
a
They had
fucking
to promote it.
wild time that was, wasn't it? Fuck.
That was a random thought for sure.
Oh,
was
it was
very
super random. It's so. I guess to put some context to it, you were talking about Triple C, that led me to Olympics, that led me to Patrick Cummins at DC, and how ridiculous of a fucking selling point that really ended up being towards the end, because Patrick Cummins was awful. God,
He was okay.
He
Give
had
the
a
guy some
solid little
respect.
career, dude.
Give the guy some respect. The guy fucking worked at Starbucks.
Yeah, and
And fucking
he beat some guys in the UFC.
the guy had wrestling, but he was dude. He was terrible, man. I hated watching him fight. I thought he was.
I mean, he beat Jan Blachowicz. Like, his career was
he
not
wrestled Jan Blachowicz.
I mean, but how many people beat Jan Blachowicz?
I guess, but once Jan Blachowicz learns how to stop a takedown, Patrick Cummins all of a sudden doesn't know what to do. He was horrible. Yeah, I wasn't a fan.
okay.
Anyway,
Back on track.
enough
back on
enough
track.
shitting on this poor guy. It's just a random thought. All right, so my top 5 Number 5, Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja has a solid resume, man, and his performances himself. It's difficult for me as somebody who likes to watch these guys and almost study them to a certain extent and take away, their fighting styles and their approaches and things like that. Pantoja not only has a solid resume, but man, the way he fights has to be taken into consideration. His performances, I think, are really, really top notch. He is a very aggressive fighter, but he's very technical and gets the job done, man. I'm a big fan of him and the way he fights and the performances he puts on. So I had him at number 5. And basically fighters 1 through 4 are exactly the same as what Mike had. I have Deiveson Figueiredo at number 4. Couldn't put him any higher because Brandon Moreno is 2-0 or 2-1 against him. I had Brandon Moreno at number 3. Brandon Moreno, I think at this point, has proven that hard work has gotten him to this point. He was able to grind his way to multiple UFC belts at this point. Obviously, dropping his first defense, if I'm not mistaken, against Deiveson Figueiredo, and then picking him back up. I'm a big fan, man. Obviously, you guys know I tend to gush on Moreno quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of that nerd. And
I was very curious if you would have him at number 2. I really was.
I wanted to. The reality is had we had a fight, obviously, between Cejudo and Moreno, it would be a lot clearer. But
for sure, yeah.
As much as I love Moreno, he's not an Olympic champion. And he's not an Olympic champion that has shown that he's also effective with that skill set in the octagon. And Henry Cejudo, I think, is, for all the shit he took against Aljo and all this other stuff, Aljo is a gigantic human being. Like, you got to cut this man a break a little bit. Aljo is massive. And the fact that he got takedowns at all against Aljo, in my opinion, is absolutely savage. So I think there's a lot of things that people need to take into consideration with that fight at 135. But at 125, I think that Henry Cejudo is one of the best fighters. And I would put him in number 1 if it wasn't for the fact that I think that Demetrius Johnson is just the best fighter in the world. Technique. I understand there's John Jones, and he's got the resume to back it, and he's definitely got technique to back up the argument as well. But, like, if I look at their fighting styles and I just compare them, if I just compare the fighting styles, I prefer Demetrius Johnson over John Jones, personally. I still think John Jones is the best, the GOAT, so to say. But that would be my reasoning for Demetrius Johnson. I mean, frankly, they're at the ends of the spectrum at this point. John Jones is like the best gigantic human being in the world, and Demetrius Johnson is like the best tiny person in the world. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, I think, as far as I'm concerned. Whoever doesn't have Demetrius Johnson as their number 1 flyweight in the world, you're just fucking silly, frankly.
Yeah, John is like a foot taller than DJ.
Yeah. It might be more than a foot.
Yeah.
Is DJ 5'2"?
He's
See that
5.
Now you got me.
He might be 5'4", or at least listed as 5'4".
Then it's about a foot.
DJ
5'3".
is 5'3".
Wow, 13 inches. Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, you're right. They are the opposite ends of the male human body spectrum.
Yeah, they are.
All right, Mark.
Imagine if DJ was that fucking big. Like if DJ was
but that's also physics.
50 pounds.
It's also just physics, and like a guy who's Jones's frame and size cannot move his body that fast, as fast as that.
I mean, there is something to be said about that, but the footwork, though, right? There are technical aspects that are very different. There's the way that they strike. Like John Jones's position and how he approaches a fight is very much about like taking guys down to the ground. Like DJ will fucking strike and bang with you and get the best out of you, and he'll slip punches and he'll do a lot of things. But if he goes down to the ground, the man looks like an all-American wrestler on the ground too. You know what I mean?
Great.
He's so adept in every single position that it's difficult for me to not appreciate how significantly well-rounded he is. John Jones, to me, we could argue that maybe earlier on in his career where guys were a little bit more one-dimensional earlier on, right? Like a lot of these guys were coming out that had one real style that they worked with, right? Shogun was a Muay Thai guy. He wasn't going to really wrestle you that much. And so John might have been able to take advantages at those points, but I just think you could see John is a wrestler. John has adapted his style to work for how good his wrestling is, and his wrestling is some of the best wrestling that you will see in the UFC. Maybe even better than Demetrius, but I think Demetrius is just an overall better fighter.
Okay.
I feel like you work John Jones into 50% of our episodes.
Really?
Do you feel like that, Mike? I feel like he always is like, if we make a comparison to, say, John Jones, like all the fucking time. You love you some John Jones.
Jones is great, man. He's great.
No, I'm just kidding. The comparison made sense in that spot. All right, so I haven't talked in a while. To remind, what I have given you so far is Dotson at 10, then Pantoja, then Horiguchi, then Pettis, and then Jussier Formiga. So to begin my top 5, I will be the guy who has a little bit of a curveball. It is going to be Davison Figueiredo.
Whoa!
I understand that
so curious.
You guys have him 4. When I first started to jot my list down, I had him 4. Obviously, he has been a champion in the UFC. The guy I have ahead of him has not. A huge plus in Figueiredo's corner is that he's only lost 3 times in his career, and it's been to 2 men. Obviously, Brandon Moreno finished him twice. And then his other losses to the man I have 1 spot behind him in Jussier Formiga. That aside, he's beaten everyone he's fought. But his resume is not terribly deep, if we're being honest. He beat Jared Brooks. He beat Pantoja, which, of course, is a good win. He beat Tim Elliott. He beat Joe Benavidez twice when he was much older and at the end of his career. And it wasn't even really twice because the first one was due to a headbutt, which is why they rematched anyway. He beat Alex Perez, and then he's got the one Brandon Moreno win and the draw in a 4-fight series, but he lost him twice. So, of course, it's nothing to scoff at all. You know, wins over Moreno and Pantoja and Benavidez are great on your resume. But to me, the resume, once I really broke it down, was not deep enough to put him over the man in my number 4 spot. And that man is, funny enough, the man who he's beaten twice, Joseph Benavidez.
Wow.
Holy shit.
I get it.
Wow.
If you want to say he got finished by Figueiredo twice, how can he be ahead of him? But let me reiterate. In the first fight, he lost because of a headbutt. So let's throw that out. From there, yes, he got beat by Figgy 1 time. But it's the second to last fight of his entire career. He takes 1 more fight, he retires. He was clearly not the same at that point. And taking a loss as an older fighter to Figgy, to me, was not enough to put him behind Figgy because I just felt like the resumes were too incomparable. Like, Benavidez's resume is so good that you could put him like 2 on this list, and I would be like, yeah, like I get it. Like, other than DJ, he's very easily the man in this top 10 with the longest list of quality wins. Like, he has beaten everyone. He started fighting in 2006, granted with a bunch of fights at bantamweight as well. He didn't lose to anyone other than Dominic Cruz or Demetrius Johnson until 2018. He had 25 other fights to that point that were not against Cruz or Johnson, and he won every single one of them. That's an insane run of success. And not to mention, one of his losses to each of those guys was a split, Cruz and DJ. So that other loss in 2018 finally did come. It was a really competitive split decision and toss-up against Sergio Pettis. He followed that up by knocking out Alex Perez, beating Dustin Ortiz, TKOing Jussier Formiga, who I had at 6 on my list. And then at the very end was the Figgy fights and the Askarov fight, and he walked away. But to me, he didn't look like he was at the top of his game anymore, and the list of wins is just enormous. I mean, he beat Formiga twice. He beat Cejudo. He beat McCall. He beat Yerushitani, who I mentioned earlier. He beat bantamweight great Miguel Torres, and many, many more of the guys who are like, that's a solid dude, that's a solid dude. So, yes, he never became UFC champion. Easily one of the best ever to not achieve that. But in the end, I couldn't deny the resume, and I just was more impressed by it than what Figueiredo's resume is at this point. So he snuck ahead of him as my number 4 fighter. Number 3, Brandon Moreno from here, I'm the same as you guys. You could argue him maybe against Henry if you wanted to. He obviously is still the current reigning defending UFC flyweight champion, so he could certainly add to this resume. Finishing Figueiredo twice, I feel like puts a huge stamp on his resume. He's finished Kai Kara France twice as well. He's beaten him twice. Finished him once, though. He finished Brandon Royval. He beat Formiga. He did beat Askar Askarov if it wasn't for some stupid judging in that draw. But I felt there was enough losses to keep him behind Cejudo. He lost to Pettis. He's got the 2 to Pantoja, if we're counting tough. The 1 to Figgy, obviously. Despite those, I'll point out he's another guy who's never been finished in his entire career. I mean, I guess he was on tough, but if we're talking pro career, he never has. And if he can turn back Pantoja in this next fight, his resume gets even stronger, so we'll see. But number 2, I felt like did have to be Henry Cejudo. Handful of reasons why I feel like that's the correct spot. Obviously, you guys agree. I wasn't sure if you were going to. But 1, he was the flyweight champion, moved up in weight to take the bantamweight belt as well and add double champ status to his resume. That's got to count for something. He beat Demetrius Johnson to take that flyweight title, which no man could do. And the main reason he's above Moreno for me is he was truly bested 1 time at flyweight. The Benavidez loss was super controversial. There was a point deduction involved. It was all over the place. And that loss aside, the only other loss is Aljo up at bantamweight, which takes nothing away from his flyweight resume to me. So the DJ loss is really the only one, and he got it back. So you look at the names he's beaten: Formiga, Pettis, Mighty Mouse, Dillashaw, Cruz. That's more than Moreno can say, I think, at this point in his career. So I do think Henry deserves to be number 2. And then number 1, obviously, I knew we'd all agree here. If you make any top 10 flyweight list and you do not have DJ at number 1, you can take your list and rip it up into tiny pieces and place it directly into a garbage can.
Correct.
He is the flyweight GOAT. No doubt about it. He reigned as UFC champ for 6 years, defended the title 12 times. 7 of those 12 defenses were finishes. He's given us highlights for days. The Ray Borg armbar is up there with my favorite highlights in the history of MMA.
Yep.
Throw in the Moraes highlight that he just gave us 1 fight ago with a knockout, and plenty more. When he did finally lose his title in the UFC, he still went to 1, rattled off 5 out of 6. He gave us a great trilogy with Adriano Moraes, who was clearly much, much bigger than him, and he was still able to knock him out and then clearly win the 3rd fight to take that trilogy. He's beaten 7 of the guys in my top 12. The only ones he hasn't are like the more modern fighters who he never had a chance to fight, and he just has a resume that I feel like will not be touched at flyweight for some time. I feel like the Henrys and the Morenos could even add to. Henry's not going to fight at flyweight anymore, but Moreno, Figgy, whoever, I think they could add to theirs, and they're still not catching DJ at this point. So he's a clear 1 for me.
Yeah.
And that is it. Good work. Mike, we had the same exact 10 men.
Just in a different order.
Yep.
And Omar's was very similar, too. He just had McCall and Royval up in there.
I mean, I had McCall at 11, so not terribly
Dude, respect with the Royval pick, Mike. That's my guy. I just feel like guys like Royval and Kai Kara France, they're just too... The ink isn't dry.
Royval over Horiguchi set me.
The Pettis thing, though, I can't get behind the Pettis thing, man. I can't get behind the Pettis thing. Especially if you're going to include his current success in a reasoning behind him being on a flyweight list, because the dude doesn't fight at flyweight anymore.
I only included Kyoji since they're both flyweights.
I know, I'm not really on board for either one. But Pettis winning a belt at 135 to me means dick all for a 125 list. You know what I mean?
Neither of us talked about that, though.
Hansen
Touche.
did.
Huh?
Mike did.
I did?
You talked about him being bantamweight champ?
Well, he talked about him having a belt at Bellator, which to me
maybe
means nothing because that was at 135.
Does it mean nothing to you that he beat Moreno and Benavidez and Formiga and Horiguchi?
Nothing.
Like, that's a hell of a 4 men.
They are. And like I said, I think if I felt that those wins were that impactful in his current state of his career, I would probably have included him in 125. But I think what makes Sergio Pettis at this point the guy that people talk about is his bantamweight run. I think that's what has made Sergio Pettis.
Yeah, I mean, it never happened in the UFC in terms of a true breakthrough because he left.
Yeah, but his fight style was a little bit different. Like, he was a lot more tentative back then. He was squeaking out decisions. You know what I mean? Like, since he moved to bantamweight, he's fucking a lot of people up at bantamweight, dude. Like, he looks good. A lot better, in my opinion, at bantamweight and in Bellator in general than he did in the UFC.
Yeah, I don't know. Agree to disagree.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like I said, this list was a bitch, man. It really
was tough. I mean, and you did have Sergio in your honorables. It's not like we're so far off.
Because I started with him in there.
Because, like, no one is really that far apart from each other, but you can still argue it for days.
Even Kyoji as well. Like, you know.
We got to figure out.
Kyoji was one of those guys at 125. He had his wins. He had his good performances, fought for the belts and all that other stuff. But, like, I feel like he's had so much success at 135 fighting in all these other, you know, the Bellators and the Risings and stuff like that, that it's hard for me to really stick him on a list for 125. You know what I mean? That's really where I ran into the issues, where the guys who bounced around quite a bit at 135 and 125 and where they really made the most impact of one over the other.
I get it. I get that. All right, Mike, who were your honorables again? Because I want to try to average this out like we did last time.
I just had one. I just had Ian McCall at 11. Oh, and I had Moraes.
You said a second one. Oh, yeah.
I said Moraes and
so you would say McCall 11, Moraes 12?
Yeah.
That was my same. So we have the same top 12. That's wild. God
damn it.
And then, Omar, who were your honorables?
I guess if I'm putting them in order, I would put Pettis.
Yeah, try.
Pettis, Horiguchi, and Elliott.
Okay. And then, so, Mike, we would need to say where we would put Roy Val if we're going to make a group average, since Roy Val's on Omar's list. I guess I named 15 guys and he wasn't on it, but maybe he'd be 16 for me, I guess. I'm trying to think.
I have to think. I wouldn't. I mean, as much as you guys know, I'm a Roy Val guy. I wouldn't consider him for an all-time flyweight yet.
He might be.
He just doesn't have any points to me.
He might be 17 for me if I have to put a number on it.
Say 6. I'll say 16.
Yeah,
I'll give him some love.
I'll say 7.
I mean, I fucking love the guy. I love him. I love the way he fights. I'm a big fan.
I mean, with you guys having Horiguchi and, like, if I put Horiguchi and Sergio Pettis on my list, Ian McCall and Brandon Royval wouldn't have made it. But I just didn't, like I said from before, I just didn't find them eligible for my list.
Oh, dude, I don't hate it. I love seeing the differences. I mean, I put Benavidez over Figueiredo. I didn't expect to do that, and I know you guys didn't agree with it. All right, cool. I got to average
I don't
this out.
hate it though, man. Like, Benavidez was, like I said, he was the prince, man. He was the Chad Mendez of that division for, like, the longest time.
Dude, the resume was just so long. I was like, oh my god, he beat fucking everyone.
Yeah, and it was a situation like a lot of times with a lot of these guys where if Demetrius Johnson wasn't the number one guy, Benavidez would have been a fucking champion long before that. Well, but Demetrius Johnson was, and Benavidez just came in at the wrong time, I guess. You know what I mean? It just sucked. It was one of those things, like the Colby thing. You know, they talk about how if Usman hadn't been champion at the time, Colby would have been. And sometimes that's just how the dice are rolled, you know?
Probably.
It's very true. Very true. All right.
Did we do it?
Well, that was good. I liked it. I like doing these top 10s, man. They're fun. They're fun.
It's so fun.
We'll have to keep working our way.
So, are we doing women next time? Or are we going back to women's list the next time we have an opportunity for this?
We did women's.
We did all women. We didn't.
Bro, I don't remember what we've done.
Oh yeah, we did all women's because we felt like the individual weight classes were not quite as deep enough to bother.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll do bantamweight next time.
Bantamweight,
which is I'm gonna fucking murder myself doing bantamweight.
I'm gonna say bantamweight is probably equally as ridiculous as flyweight, to be quite honest.
Oh, I think it's worse, dude. I think
because you got to go all the way back. You kind of have to go back to WEC a bit. You have to take that, I think, into consideration.
You have a large amount of modern dudes who you could argue should be on the list as well. Like, it's going to be a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
do we have any trivias, Mike?
We do not.
We do not.
There was no time for the trivia making.
All right.
If If anybody out there wants to submit a fucking trivia question, that'd be awesome. That would be awesome. It would be.
Yeah, find a good way to do that without giving us the answer.
Give me the answer.
Yeah, true.
Well, how are they going to give it to you? You got to give them your email. Because if they send it to the
DM
group
me.
email, I think we're all going to get it.
DM me. Find me on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, DM them on Instagram.
The Michael Hansen on Instagram. Boom.
Yeah. Slide into
Be
his
like,
DMs. Give him a little something,
Slide
something.
into my DMs and be like, yo, listen to your show. I wanted to submit a trivia question. If you do it, I will shout you out. Be like, so-and-so submitted this trivia question. Thanks, so-and-so. Shout out.
Thanks, so-and-so.
Yeah. No dick pics, please. He is a taken man.
Okay.
All right, guys. I think we're good here. Let's get out of here.
Okay. Thanks for watching.
Fucking guys typing out here. You guys are out of
I'm still
control.
averaging
I'm writing
out.
down.
I'm averaging out all this shit to find our overall rankings. I'm almost done right now. I'm
You're
almost
doing
done.
the same thing. Almost like,
you're doing it
so
too?
So goodbye.
Like, yeah, like I'm just
People
people in
I
their
should
cars
go. I
like,
gotta-
dude, what are they doing? What are they doing right now?
I gotta go prep my shit for tomorrow for my kids' lunch and all that shit.
Oh boy, that's tough. I
Tell
gotta
him to
go.
put bologna on his own goddamn
man.
bread.
Oh fuck! I forgot to say at the beginning of the show. Cool news: John Jones is going to be a special guest of Anthony Pettis
Oh, that's
Fighting
right.
Championship in
Yeah,
Milwaukee,
he fucking is.
and I'm going to get to announce the man himself
Fucking
at the beginning of the night. I can't believe I'm going to say words into a microphone that is introducing John Jones into a crowd.
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
can't believe it.
And Bilal
I can't
Muhammad
believe
too
I'm
is
gonna
going to
be
be
at the
there
same
too,
event.
but that's sick.
And Bilal.
literally
Yeah.
the coolest thing I've ever heard.
I don't know.
in my life.
Dude,
Crazy.
Nico Price was at the regional fight that I was at this weekend where
No
where the Muay Thai
way.
fought.
Oh yeah, you saw him?
Yeah. He was. I'm assuming there must have been his camp or guys from his camp must have been fighting, obviously at a much lower level. But yeah, I saw him. I saw somebody else, and I've been trying to remember for the last 2 days who the fuck it was, but like I have no idea anymore. But it was cool to see UFC guys, very normal, just chilling at these events and helping their fighters out and things like that. I think is dope.
That's awesome. All right, folks.
I
I would
got
say.
the-
I would say.
I got the averages. Should I say it before the show
Okay,
signs
say it real
off?
quick.
So as a whole, our rankings were DJ 1, Cejudo 2, Moreno 3, Figueiredo 4, Benavidez 5, Pantoja 6 on the back of Omar's high ranking,
Wow.
Formiga 7,
Wow.
Pettis 8, Horiguchi 9, Dotson 10.
Wow.
That was our collective ranks.
I love it.
And then
All
McCall
right.
would have been the odd man out, followed by
I think that's a pretty good
Royval.
list. I'm
Yeah,
not
man.
mad at that list at all.
All right, folks. I would say enjoy the fights this weekend, but there are none. In the meantime, enjoy this top 10 list that we just gave you tonight. And let us know down below in the comments who is your top 10 all-time MMA flyweights. That being said, have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Bye.